Thank you. And I think most of us down here really want individuals to be treated openly and fairly. And it sounds like that's been a goal of yours. But in the gender identity world, you certainly, I think if that's what you were referring to with the gay and lesbian work, that seems to be the hot button issue right now. Is that something that you worked in?
I don't focus on that primarily right now. Since I left Identity, I left in September and moved up here to Fairbanks full time. I'm concerned, and my role, of course, in the Human Rights Commission is with all Alaskans in all areas as it pertains to our law, Human Rights Law 1880, which does include sex, but of course that's not been interpreted yet to include certain things that I worked for in my role at Identity. So really focused on race, sex, religion, national origin, ability, disability, age, and so forth. And those are the primary concerns then with Human Rights Law 1880.
And that was kind of where I was getting at, Drew, and that is the advocacy in one arena, and we all have to deal with this, and that is we advocate because we care so deeply, and yet when we get into a public body, we have to look at the law and try to apply it as evenly as we can. And I think probably because some of the differences I've had with the very group that you advocated with, I could see some real tension there. And, I just, when reading your biography, it just got my attention up a little bit. Do you think that you'd be able to be pretty even-handed with those? For example, I'm a Christian. The persuasion that I carry is very different than probably some that you carry. But could we agree to work through the law in those particular areas? Is what I'm looking for.
Since you brought up ACLU, I just have a couple of questions. The ACLU of Alaska sued to overturn a law passed by the people through the initiative process in 2010, and it provided that a parent had to be notified before an abortion could be performed on their minor daughter. And I just want to know if the candidate supported ACLU's position on that.
Well, it wasn't my decision to, their pursuit, the ACLU's pursuit of that particular item was done as an organization. And my opinions and vantage points are separate from that. And I'm here to uphold and enforce the human rights law as it pertains to discrimination areas of employment, public accommodations, finance and credit. And I will absolutely do that in keeping with the law.
You're associated with ACLU. I just want to know if you supported their position on that or not. Do you support ACLU's position on that? Did you support the ACLU's position on the initiative that I just described, against the initiative I described?
Well, not sure how it pertains to this position, but I'm happy to share.
Well, you're not being asked.
And that personally, I do support a woman's right to choose.
Well, that wasn't the question.
And to have the kind of reproductive care she needs.
Well, sorry, that just wasn't the question. And whether it pertains to it or not, you're not being asked to vote on or to support a specific issue. What you're asking is for people who are either going to vote for you or not for your confirmation. And you're going to be in a position that's going to be dealing with these kinds of things, even though maybe not this specifically. And I'd kind of like to know your predisposition in these issues. So did you support the ACLU's position in that matter or not? And since we've talked so much about it, let me just restate it. It was the initiative. It was passed in 2010, and it provided that a parent had to be notified before an abortion could be performed on a minor daughter. And the ACLU opposed the initiative. Do you oppose that initiative?
That was early on when I first started working there. I guess I'm struggling with the question because it really didn't pertain to me. I just started working there.
Okay.
I'd have to look over it again to really read it.
All right. I'll go to the next one. I have a question about the ACLU.
Okay, thank you.
A similar ACLU question. ACLU of Alaska was one of the plaintiffs who sued to overturn a law passed by the legislature that sought to limit public funding for abortion only to those cases for which it was medically necessary. Were you in support of the ACLU's position on that or against it?
Yes, I was in support of it.
Okay, thank you. I have one more. This is ACLU National. Again, it pertains to the kinds of issues that will come before you. ACLU filed a complaint against the Catholic Hospital in Michigan, and they argued that the Catholic Hospital engaged in sex discrimination because of their refusal to perform sterilization procedures. And I'd just like to know what your view, if a religious health care provider can refuse to provide abortions or sterilization procedures if the health care provider, is the health care provider in this case guilty of sex discrimination if they choose not to do that?
If something like that were to come before the Human Rights Commission, of course, we have attorneys that would need to interpret how the current human rights law, 1880, pertains, how it we would interpret that. I would have to go on their expertise to give an objective, impartial response as a commissioner. If it were to come to the point where we had a hearing as commissioners, I would need to hear all of the legal background to it and make a very objective decision about it.
One of the things I'm struggling with isn't necessarily this candidate. It's the Human Rights Commission that seems to want to get out of the bounds that are created for it by the statutes that we have written. And it seems that the ACLU often comes to their aid in that. And so I'm just trying to figure out here, are we going to add another person to the commission that maybe has views that are opposed to what the statute is and is willing to go through other means to achieve those ends? And again, if I can go off the candidate's position right now, the commission has said things like someone you and I know, the chair of the commission, has said, talked about the beauty of it all, that they don't have to come to the legislature on these kinds of issues because of federal cases and those kinds of things. So it seems they're planning to usurp the legislature's authority. And I just want to know if we're going to add another person to the Human Rights Commission that holds views that are out of step with the rest of Alaska. I have some real questions about this candidate, and I want to know more.
I'm a little perplexed by the previous line of questioning. This is the Alaska Human Rights Commission. It has nothing to do with abortion. The individual's private views on that subject are completely irrelevant and, quite frankly, border on the verge of violating his constitutional rights to privacy. It's offensive. And I should point out that the two cases that were mentioned, two Supreme Court cases that were mentioned, one was on parental notification, which, by the way, was upheld. The Supreme Court reversed that. The second one was on public funding for abortions, which, by the way, the Supreme Court reversed that as well. So the position that that Drew Phoenix has taken, or his organization has taken, which he hasn't worked in 4 years, is a position that the Alaska Supreme Court agreed with. So I want someone on the Human Rights Commission that understands the law, that is advocating for justice and human rights. And I don't care what his personal views are on these highly controversial issues that have absolutely nothing to do with his ability to perform his functions as a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wilkowski. Just in response to that, I've been on this committee for a long, long time, and I've heard you and many others ask people deeply about their personal views on things only to find out how they would serve in a committee. So,
never on abortion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. And so, Senator Kelly.
Somehow pose that to question a person sitting for a commission on their views on controversial issues is somehow a violation of their constitutional rights is absurd.
Drew, thank you very much for coming before the committee and fielding the questions the way you have, and I thought you've done a very good job. If you don't mind, I'd like to have you back based on the request from Senator Kelly. Senator Wilcox.
I would request at that time that will there be an opportunity for the public to comment on this nominee? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. No, I have no problem with that.